Okay, now that we've dealt with our validation parameters, we need to provide the refresh token to the client so they can make use of it when their token is about to expire. So what we'll do is we'll go to our account controller, and what we'll do inside this class, which is a very busy class, I agree. So what we'll do in here is we're going to create a new private method. And it's not going to return anything, but we're going to make a database call inside here. So we're going to say private async task. And we're going to say set refresh token. And we're going to take in an app user as a parameter. And what we'll do first of all, we'll generate a new refresh token. So we'll say var refresh token equals token service and generate refresh token. And then we'll say user.refresh tokens and add, and then we can pass in our new refresh token. And what we also want to do is save this to the database so that when it comes time for a user to refresh the token, they can compare it with what's stored in our database. So we'll say await and user manager, and then we'll say update async and pass in the user object. Now we're going to send the token back inside a cookie. So what we'll do is we'll say, and we'll give our cookie some options. So we'll say var cookie options equals new cookie options. And we'll bring in ASP.NET Core HTTP. And what we'll do in our cookie options is we'll say HTTP only equals true. And this means that our refresh token is not accessible via JavaScript. But we don't need to access our cookie in the client. We only need to access this on the server. So what we can do is we can send our token or our refresh token back in a cookie. And when it's in a cookie, that means the client is going to send up this token with every request. And we'll specify an expiry date of our cookie as well, and we'll set it to the same amount of time that we're given to our refresh token. So we'll say date time, we'll bring in using system, and then we'll say UTC now and add days, and we'll specify 7. Same amount of time that we gave our refresh token in the class. And then what we can do is say response.cookies.append, and we'll give it a name of refresh token, and we'll say refresh token.token, and then we'll pass in the cookie options that we created. So we'll use this method on every request that we use to either log in or register or our Facebook login. So whenever a user takes that action, then they're going to get a new refresh token added to their account. So what we'll do is before we return any user objects, we'll say await and we'll say set refresh token and pass in the user. And I'll just copy this because we're going to need to do this for each of our methods. So this is the Facebook login, and for our get current user, do we want to do it here? And we can do it here. It's kind of debatable whether or not we should do it here or if you want to do it here, because if we're getting the current user, they've been away for a while, possibly, or they've just refreshed their browser, and that's another time we call this get current user. So I'm going to add it here anyway, but I'm going to suggest that you may or may not want to add your set refresh token here, because then it's going to give the user a new token when they simply refresh their browser. I'm going to do it here anyway because we've only got a small amount of time, and you could always remove this later if you don't feel it's necessary. And we'll also do this for the register user as well. We'll await set refresh token, and also for the login method as well. And that's it. So what we also need in here is an endpoint so that a user can actually refresh their token. So just below the Facebook endpoint, I'm just going to add an HTTP post, and we'll call it refresh token. And what we're going to return is a public async task of type action result, and we're going to return a user DTO with this, which is going to contain a new JWT that they can then use and store in their local storage, and we'll call it refresh token. Now we do want them to be authenticated to this endpoint, because we're not going to allow them to refresh their token if their current token, their JWT, has expired. So what we're going to do is add an authorize attribute to list method. Now what I've also found is that because we've applied allow anonymous at the controller level, then that authorize method is actually ignored. So what we're going to do is remove allow anonymous from the controller, and we're going to apply it directly to the methods that we do want to be allowed to be anonymous. So the login method, for example, and the register method also needs to be allow anonymous. And the get current user we have an authorize attribute for, and the FB login we also want this to be allow anonymous as well. And our refresh token is going to be authorized against. So what we want to do inside our refresh token endpoint is we want to get hold of the refresh token from their cookies. So we'll say var refresh token equals, and we can say request.cookies, and then in square brackets we can look for the refresh token. What we want to do then is go and get hold of the current user, including their refresh token collection. And we'll have access to the user because this is an authorized endpoint. So what we'll do is we'll say var user equals await and user manager dot users, and we're going to say include, and we'll say r goes to r dot refresh tokens, and then we'll say first or default async, and we'll say x goes to x dot username, that's equal to, and we'll get the user claims principal, so we'll say user, and then find first value, and we'll say claim types dot name. And if we don't have a user, so we'll say if user equals null, then we're just going to return unauthorized from this. Although they shouldn't get this far if they're not authenticated, but just in case. And what we'll do is we'll get hold of their old token, so we'll say var old token equals user dot refresh tokens dot single or default, and we'll say x goes to x dot token, that's equal to refresh token. And then we can do a couple of checks. We can check to see if the old token is not equal to null and the old token is not active. So we'll add the exclamation mark and say old token is active. And if the token has been revoked or it's expired, then it's not going to be active and therefore it's not going to be valid. So we'll return unauthorized. And if the old token is not equal to null, then we're going to replace this token with a new one. So we're going to say old token dot revoked equals date time dot UTC now. And if they get this far, then we know that their token or their refresh token is active. So what we can do is return, and we're going to say create user object and pass in the user, which is going to give them a new JWT, and they'll be able to continue on using the application. So what we'll do next is we'll take a look at our functionality in Postman to make sure everything works as we would expect it to.